Howdy folks, my name's Kevin. Welcome back to Highland Mountain Bike Park. I'm standing up here on Upper Hellion, one of our signature Black Diamond jump trails. And today we're gonna go over our August progression guide, which is gonna go over jumping. Jumping has been our most requested topic for our progression guides, and I'm stoked to join you all and go over some jumping technique. Just quick overview for today's video. We're gonna start by heading down to our park ready zone, our learning area where we can slowly build up our skills and go from small to medium to large. In that park ready zone, I'm going to introduce some basic jump technique and go over our flat ground bunny hops. And then from there, we're going to start applying that skill out on the hill. And then to wrap things up, we're going to go over some more advanced jump techniques like boosting and scrubbing, how we can create more height out of a jump, and how we can hit a jump faster but maintain our speed and control. So follow me, we'll head on down to that park ready zone. I'm standing in a nice flat area in the park ready zone, and this is what we need to start our progression for jumping, a nice flat area to talk about our flat ground bunny hops. Before we start doing that though, I want to think about my jump philosophy, and that is we want to rely more on our pop, on our technique, than on our speed. The more and more we rely on speed to clear a jump, eventually we start getting bucked and feeling like we're out of control on a jump because the jump is jumping us and we're not the ones dictating our height. Now I want to start thinking about how we pop and what is pop. Pop is the deliberate motion of loading your suspension and exploding upwards with your bike. A pop is very similar or almost identical to a flat ground bunny hop, where you use a hopping motion to get both wheels off the ground. That is the technique that we need to use and apply on jumps. If we just ride at a jump somewhat fast and we kind of stay still and do nothing, that's where the jump is jumping us. When we start pressing into the jump and exploding and popping up with our bike, that is pop. That's what we want to be doing. To think about our pop, I want to think about the two different styles of flat ground bunny hop. There is the more advanced J hop, where you lift your front wheel and then you explode off your back wheel. And then there is the more common level lift, where we're lifting both wheels at the same time. Both are very useful skills to have and very important to know how to do both before we start getting into jumping. To think about our level lift, I want to think about a front and rear wheel lift first. To lift my front wheel, I don't just yank up on my handlebars. Instead, I load or press into my fork and I let that fork rebound and explode up with me. To lift my back wheel, I think about imagining my feet and pedals like if my feet were hands, and if my foot could claw or grab or put backwards pressure on my pedal, that's how I scoop and lift up my back wheel. So if I just kind of rotate my ankle heel upwards and forwards, and I put a little bit of pressure backwards on my toe, that can scoop that pedal and lift my back wheel. If I combine both my front and rear wheel techniques, that is where I get the level lift. For a J hop, I want to think about lifting my front wheel a little bit differently. I want to think about doing a lunge, almost like a manual, to lift that front wheel to get it up. And then I think about driving my hands forward to explode off my back wheel. All right, now that we introduced some of those pop techniques in the flat ground setting, and we have our flat ground level lift and our flat ground J hop, now we can start applying that stuff over here on the jumps, and also talking about when and why we use those different skills. So to start, I want to think about 3 different speeds for jumping. Speed number 1 is if you're going at a jump too slow, and you know you're going too slow, and you need to create all the height and pop you can to clear the jump, that is where that J-hop technique is most useful. It's most useful at slower speeds to create more height and boost. that is a more advanced jump technique. And before practicing that J-hop jump technique, we should master and practice that level lift jump technique. Oftentimes, riding our downhill trails here, trail speed gives us a lot of momentum to clear jumps, and often we do need to go a bit slower into jumps to make sure we're not getting bucked or overshooting. And if we're going that normal, like nice mellow average speed at a jump, that's where we're most often using that level lift technique. We don't need to pull out the massive J-hop to clear it, but we want to get enough height and control to feel nice on it. So that's where we use our level lift. And then the third speed is what happens if we're going way too fast at a jump. And that is when we start thinking about absorbing and scrubbing a jump. Also a more advanced skill, and we'll talk about that later. To start though, I want to think about just the stages of a jump. Where I'm standing right here, this is the approach. Coming into a jump, I want to be standing nice and tall at the top of my range of movement. After the approach, right on over here, about here is our transition, where it starts going from flat ground to an uphill slope, the face of the jump. And then up here, this is our lip, and we have a knuckle and a landing. I want to think about in the approach, like I was saying, being nice and tall. Once I cross that transition and my bike is on the face of the jump, that is where I'm pressing into my bike and I'm loading my bike. And then as my front wheel is at the very end of the lip and I'm about to take off, I should be at the top of my range of movement again, and I should be exploding up and bringing my bike up with me. Another important thing to think about when jumping and thinking about these three jump techniques, the scrub, the boost, and the level lift, is that no two jumps are created equal, right? We have tons of different types of jumps: step ups, step downs, tabletops, gap jumps, hips, shark fins, all sorts of things. And there's not one technique that we copy and paste on every single jump, right? We're often blending skills and pulling from both the level lift and the J-hop. Like if I'm going at a jump and I think I'm going kind of slow, but not slow enough to use my full J-hop, maybe I blend level lift and J-hop. Another thing to think about is our pre-ride, re-ride, free-ride mentality. If it's your first time at Highland and you've never ridden Hellion, Hellion's got a ton of different jumps that turn and twist, and we got to pre-ride and re-ride that trail several times to get comfortable before we know where each jump and landings are going. So really important that you know a trail and master it before you start jumping and letting the wheels fly. Now I want to move on and take some of those skills out onto the hill. I will leave you with one thought, that myself and all of the training center coaches here at Highland Mountain Bike Park are amazing coaches, but repetition is the best coach in the world. And the more you come in here and do reps, the better and better those jumps are going to feel. Let's head on up onto the hill and look at some other jumps. All right, now we're here on Upper Cat's Paw, looking at actually the very first jump on Cat's Paw. If you don't know, Cat's Paw is our blue flow trail and a great place to start your jumping progression. Earlier, down in that park ready zone, we mentioned 3 speeds for jumping. Too slow, if we know we're going too slow to jump, we use our J-hop technique to create more height and boost to clear a jump. If we're going a nice average speed, we use that normal level lift technique. And then if we're going too fast, we use our scrub technique to absorb our height and distance and land in the landing and not overshoot. The scrub technique is one of the more advanced jump techniques, and I highly recommend mastering the level lift and J-hop before playing with the scrub technique. But the scrub technique is really useful. I'm sure many of you have noticed times where you're riding trails and you're coming into a jump and you know you're going too fast, but you don't have enough time to brake and change your speed. That's where we use the scrub. To do a scrub, we want to think about doing the opposite of our normal pop technique. With our normal pop technique, we think about on the lip, standing really tall and being almost locked out at the end of the lip. Opposite, with a scrub, we want to absorb our height and distance. So on the lip, we are going to let our bike come up into us, and we're going to get nice and low. And then as that front wheel is about to take off and go over the lip, we're going to push our bike down and get our bikes to the landing as soon as possible. Really important that once we start pushing, that we're pushing down through both our feet and hands to get both of our wheels down to the landing. I commonly see people only pushing down in a scrub with their arms, and that will cause their rear wheel to still come up and land a bit nose heavy. So next time you're out on the trails, if you want to try a scrub, think about absorbing on the lip, getting nice and low, and then extending and lunging your bike downwards into the landing. It's the same feeling as high-speed pumping. If you guys saw our last month's video on pumping in our progression guide, we covered high and low speed pumping. With high speed pumping, the feeling of hitting a roller at speed, but trying to keep your wheels on the ground, it's that same feeling of high speed pumping that we use here to scrub and keep our bikes low to the ground. All right, now we're a little bit lower down on Cat's Paw in one of the main jump sections. If you've ridden at Highland before, you probably know the section that I'm standing in. Really quick, I want to talk a little bit about timing with our jumping. One point that I want to make is, if you don't know, tabletops are the best place to start learning to jump because you can take things super slow and just slowly build up lap after lap. This is a great example of a tabletop. It has a lip, it has a flat top, and a downside for the landing. My first time ever through this jump, if I don't know the jump or the trail, I could just simply roll over the jump just to feel out the shape of the lip. Then the next time, I could do a small controlled pop to the knuckle on top. And then from there, I can start slowly going faster and adding a little bit more pop until I'm getting into the landing and landing smoothly. That is the best way to approach jumping, to slowly build up. It is always safer and more controlled to undershoot a jump than to overshoot a jump. So I highly recommend building up slowly while you're learning how to jump. And that still goes for any level of jumping. Even to the extreme level of our slopestyle course, it is still safer to undershoot rather than to overshoot those big, massive jumps. One more thing I want to mention is our timing when we're popping our bikes. One good rule of thumb that I want to think about is what we're doing at the end of the lip. Like I mentioned earlier, no jump is created equal, so unfortunately we can't do the same thing every time and get the same result. We do have to adapt a little bit to the different jumps. If the lips are longer or if the lips are shorter, you know, our timing is different. But one thing that stays the same is when our front wheel is at the end of the lip and it's about to take off and roll over, that is where we should be at the top of our range of movement. And before that, we want to think about pressing into our bike through our feet. That is the key to setting a good controlled pop, whether it's a level lift or a J-hop, is we want to drive and press through the feet as that accelerates and takes our bike up at the angle of the jump. So just really important that we are always pressing through the feet and that we're always standing tall, locked out by the end of the lip. All right, we're over here on Bonesaw, one of our double black freeride trails, and behind me we got the Bonesaw hip. Before we wrap things up and we go shred this hip, I want to talk about a couple of common misconceptions and mistakes that I see people make with jumping. First of all, think about how we land. We always want to land two wheels at the same time, right? So if we're landing front wheel heavy or rear wheel heavy, we're doing something wrong. If we're landing front wheel heavy, chances are is that we're popping too late, or we're finishing our range of motion, we're finishing standing up tall as our front wheel has already left the lip and has already started descending on a path down to the ground. That's the most common reason why people are landing nose wheel heavy. Also, more rare, you could lift too much with your legs and lift that back wheel up too high. That's more uncommon, but I do see it often with people who ride clipped in. Another common mistake is landing back wheel heavy. That I often see is when people pop way too early, or they pull really hard on those bars and they yank those bars into the hips or the chest. That's where I see a lot of people landing rear wheel heavy. But those are the two common mistakes that I see while jumping. If anything else is happening, like say you're going deep and nose wheel heavy, or you're coming short and rear wheel heavy, that's when speed is probably affecting that those mistakes as well. If you're going deep and nose heavy, chances are you're just going too fast. If you're landing short and back wheel heavy, chances are you're going too slow. Yes, look at that. Alrighty, well, we went over a lot today in regards to jumping. Just to recap, we talked about my jump philosophy. We want to rely more on pop than on speed to clear a jump. Of course, speed is a part of the equation to clear a jump, but we want more pop than speed. We also reviewed the 3 different speeds of jumping. If we're going too slow and we know we're too slow, we can use our J-hop technique to create more height and distance. If we're going too fast and we know we're too fast, that's where we start scrubbing or absorbing that jump to stay low. And if we're going just right, nice average speed, that's where we're pulling out that level lift technique. In terms of timing, we always want to be pressing into the jump through our feet. That is how we set that pop and get that control in the air. And we always want to feel like we are locked out or at the top of our range of movement at the end of the lip. That's that type of timing will make sure that we're in a good spot and set up for success with our jumping. Had tons of fun going over all this jumping stuff with you guys today. I hope everyone out there got something away from this jumping talk, and we look forward to shredding with you next time. Now I'm gonna go shred these jumps and drops on bone saw, and next month we'll talk about drop progression for September's progression guide. See you out there on the trails.